Welcome to the Voices for Voices podcast, sponsored by Redwood Living. Thank you for joining us today. I am Justin Allen Hayes, founder and executive director of Voices for Voices, host, and humanitarian. You can learn more about Voices for Voices on our Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and our website, voicesforvoices.org. Voices for Voices is a 501c3 nonprofit charity organization that survives solely on donations. So if you are able to, please consider heading over to voicesforvoices.org to help us continue our mission and the goal and dream to help 3 billion people over the course of my lifetime and beyond. Or you can also send a donation to the mailing address of Voices for Voices at 2388 Beckett Circle, Stow, Ohio 44224. Or we're also on the Cash App at Voices for Voices. Are you looking for a volunteer opportunity? Or do you know somebody that is? If so, you can reach out to us today via email at president@voicesforvoices.org. I founded Voices for Voices to provide a platform for folks to share their stories with others as we work to break the stigma around mental health, accessibility, and disabilities. Also helping people get the help they need and helping them prepare and or transition into the workforce with the Voices for Voices Career Center, where we connect talent and opportunity for job seekers and employers from coast to coast and in every industry and job level. And who can forget about merchandise? Finally, the Voices for Voices merchandise shop is up and running at voicesforvoices.org/shop, where shipping is always free, and again, all donations are 100% tax deductible. Please join me in welcoming today's guest, a friend of mine, our keynote speaker at our A Brand New Day Fundraiser Gala on Friday, October 13th. He is president and CEO of the Akron-Canton Regional Foodbank, Dan Flowers. Dan, thank you for joining us today.
Justin, thank you so much for having me back. That was a wonderful introduction. I enjoyed hearing your description of the work that you're doing, and I think when you use the word humanitarian, you got it right, because you're a great guy, and the opportunity to come back, you've really stepped up. I mean, you've upgraded this considerably. When you had me out to speak for the first time, and I think it was just over a year ago, you were recording in a back garage at somebody's house, and I remember driving there, and I didn't see any signs, and I was like, what is this? But I had such a lovely conversation that day, and it was sort of a breakthrough conversation for me in a lot of ways, because I shared a story that day that I'd never spoken about publicly. And it was something that happened in my life 12, 13 years ago that I'd carried. And I think that there was something about the sweetness, the kindness that you showed that day, the format of the program, the message and the mission behind your work that just made me comfortable that day. So I want to thank you because that opened up my heart and my courage to share the story that I look forward to talking more about at your Voices for Voices event coming up next October, or this coming October. On the 13th, is it? The 13th of October?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And so I was thinking about our visit today, and I've written down a few things that I kind of wanted to talk about, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Certainly, we can give an update about what's happening down at the food bank, and books, and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. But thank you for having me back.
You're welcome. Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you a year ago, and definitely have upgraded a lot. And
that was great.
So happy
nice
to
studio.
have you back. If you want to jump into some of your preparations.
Yeah, sure. Well, I always like to start by talking about the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank. I'm getting ready to begin my 20th year of service as CEO. I was thinking on my way over here about flight hours. You know, they talk about flight hours for pilots.
Yeah.
And I think it was Malcolm Gladwell who talked about 10,000 hours being the amount of hours that you have to apply to gain mastery at anything, martial arts or any trade or position. Well, if there's 2,080 hours in every work year, and I've worked 20 years, I've got over 40,000 hours as CEO of the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank, which is a pretty crazy thought.
It is. Yeah, when you put it it's like 4 times.
Yeah. And so I've been at the helm for a while, and it's been the honor of my life to do this. I've come to understand a lot of stuff about leadership. I've seen a lot of trends, and and I'm 52 years old. I was 32 when they hired me, one of the youngest CEOs in the country. So I've got a lot of years to work, to contribute, and I'm so grateful that my experience has brought me into contact with people like you, and also because after you've done something for 20 years, like if people don't think I've got, the ability to basically be your food bank CEO by now, there's nothing I'm going to do to convince you, right? So there's a record to stand on that we get in life through being consistent, and because of that, maybe those of us that have been fortunate to last a while can start having the courage to talk about some of the challenges along the way in ways that are helpful to other people. And so that's certainly been a part of my journey, but certainly in the last couple of years with the pandemic, it's been a pretty wild ride down at the food bank, and I feel like we're starting to come out of it a little bit. How's it feel to you?
It does. A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
There's a hangover on society, I think, as a result of this, and we could certainly talk about that a little bit, but I'll just kind of hit my food bank report real quick.
Yes, please do.
So 2020 was a wild year, of course, with the pandemic beginning. I shared a little bit about that when I was on your show last year. 2021, a lot of the government programs kicked in. We saw a little reduction in demand. The National Guard stayed with us through that year, through the middle of 2021. I lost my dad in May of that year, and we talked about that, if you may recall. In 2022, we saw this inflation begin to surge, and the number of people seeking emergency food really shot up last year in 2022. We had a pretty big increase over 2021 in the number of people that come in, folks that are seeking emergency food. Inflation drove a lot of that. At the same time, the soup kitchens and homeless shelters and food pantries that get their food from the food bank continue to be under a lot of pressure. A lot of them are run by volunteers, a lot of senior citizens and retirees who, because of COVID, because of resource availability, had to step out of the work. So our network took a little bit of a hit last year. I think if I was to think about my entire career, the hardest year I think ever was 2022. I felt like we were running in sand. We lost a fair amount of people. What they call it, the Great Resignation. Was certainly a factor in that. We had more staff departures than we've ever had for, the same reasons I think people were leaving every organization. So we spent a lot of time trying to get the team restabilized and strengthened, and I think we started to come out of that towards the end of 2022. We haven't had any departures in almost 6 months for the staff, which is a blessing.
That is.
We saw food donations begin to turn around at the end of the year last year. It was a tough year for food donations with the supply chain like it was. So we started this year with a pretty good inventory, and we're about 15% ahead of where we were last year in food distribution, so we're bouncing back with our food supply. In March of 2023, this big reduction in SNAP benefits is taking place.
That's right.
And so we've been doing a lot of work on that and dealing with an increased number of people that are coming out to food pantries as a result of that. So, I think the organization continues to be strong. We've had our challenges. We've got a big construction project going on right now. I could just go on for hours, but that's kind of a general report. start on where we're at. I think we're coming out of the pandemic. The organization is stronger than it was going into it.
Good.
I think we've made a lot of bold statements in the community with respect to the nimble nature of the Food Bank's responsiveness, our commitment to mission, the engagement of our staff, our board, our volunteers in the fight against food insecurity and hunger. And it's been a pleasure. Hadn't been easy though.
Oh. Yeah, and one thing I was thinking about was maybe there's stigma too with, and we'll talk a little bit about mental health and that, but with maybe just, I don't want to say society as a whole, but some individuals, when they hear food bank, they might just think some of those canned goods. They don't also include produce and the meats and those types of things that I think maybe if you could just elaborate just the breadth of the offerings that you have.
Sure.
And there isn't a need across the board. It's not just for cans of corn and beans and the like.
Yeah. Well, just the basic definition of food bank has a lot of meanings to a lot of people. We have a lot of folks come into the food bank for a tour, and they're shocked at how big it is. Because people will often say, well, we have a food bank at my church where it's open on Wednesday nights after service. Well, a lot of charities that we consider to be member agencies or partners, charitable partners, refer to themselves as food bank. And so I think when people step into our building and see, a 100,000 square foot warehouse, it's shocking to them that we're using that same term, because I think people tend to think of food banks as, smaller grassroots charities. Well, they all were at one time, and it wasn't that long ago. But food banking, since it started in the late 60s, has gained pretty significant scale. Most food banks are the biggest charitable agencies in the communities that they serve. If you look at the Houston Food Bank, the Food Bank in Chicago, our food bank is the largest human service agency in the region that we serve. And that includes any other charity that you would think of. And that's because of the value of the food, the amount of food, and that kind of goes to the second part of your point, which is the variety. You see, food banks collect surplus food from the grocery industry. And what surprises people is how much food there is out there. Billions and billions of pounds of food, even now with the scale that we've achieved, go to waste every year. And so that was the primary mode of operation, collecting surplus food from food wholesalers, from food manufacturers, from food distributors, bringing it back into your food bank, processing it with volunteers, and then distributing that food to soup kitchens and your church pantries, faith-based organizations. Of course, as the food banks got bigger and took on more capacity, their ability to do other things started to emerge. The government started looking at food banks as an outlet for federal commodities, and so we get food from the USDA. The state of Ohio stepped up and started funding surplus agricultural programs, and we get surplus grown Ohio produce for distribution through our charities. So we've now developed a really, really wide supply line that includes manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors, growers, government entities, and that all comes into the food bank, and then it goes out to the community through these charities. The old impression of a dented can and a banana box, although I'll never say no to a dented can. Any food you have to give us, if it's good, I'll take it. Because I think every piece of food that goes through the food bank is on a mission, and I want to help it along. But it's a pretty scaled entity. It's gotten relatively sophisticated and complex, although at heart the mission is as simple and basic and pure as it ever has been.
When you think of just the breadth of the products and the food, there's also range in those individuals that are consuming and have the need. And I don't know if the inflation kicked that off or just reinvigorated that maybe that individual or that demographic that they're not. People that are in need come in all shapes, colors, sizes. It's not just that thinking of the food bank of just the cans, but also thinking of who has a need, that we all have need as a human being to consume food.
Well, I think that your work with mental health gives you a platform to understand, the human side of this. I think, we talk a lot about the people that seek emergency food. Because a lot of folks have sort of a fixed stereotype in their mind about where hunger is and who's hungry and why. My experience has taught me that it's as varied as the human condition. Food insecurity exists in urban, rural, suburban environments. It exists in and among all races of people. It exists among working people and non-working people, and among healthy and sick people. There's one overriding common thing, though, that everybody that experiences food insecurity shares, which is poverty. Food insecurity arises out of poverty, and we have a great grocery retail program system in this country. We have a great supply chain that's capable of feeding every single American, but they have to sell their food and they have to maintain a place in the market. Well, when people don't have enough money to go to a store and get the things they need, they have to look for other sources for their food stability. The Foodbank network in this country has been that, since the late 60s. It continues to be that today. But yeah, you're right. Hunger shows up in every single place. And I think another part of that is the judgments that exist, for why people are hungry. I've learned over the years that I need to set those aside, personally. I think we all have bias. I think we all tend to see people at times say, well, why are they here? Why do they need this? But I think there's something about asking for help that's universally avoided. I don't think people like to ask for help in general. Some people might see an angle and play it, but I think in service to the greater good, it's not that many. And the reality is that going in and saying, I don't have enough money to buy food, I don't have enough food in my house, it's hard enough for people to do that it weeds out 99% of any abuse that we would experience.
Wow.
It really does.
Maybe we can turn our attention to the career of how you got into food banking, that path, because we also have individuals that are looking for different industries and different job types, and so maybe some of the things that you saw and you seeked out might resonate.
Great question. That's something that I was also thinking about just today. And I think it was when I started thinking about how many accumulated hours I've done this. Like, what in the world, I've given my life to it, literally. But I just can't think about anything else I would have rather given my life to. There's a strong association between vulnerable people in poverty, people that are homeless, people that have substance abuse, mental health, addiction issues, poverty in general, that go to food pantries. And it's been the greatest thing in the world to have spent my life aligned with them. Those are my people. Now, when I started my career, I didn't really recognize that, or maybe my ego had me running from the reality of who I am in the equation. I grew up with a family that had, I think I shared some of my mother's mental health issues. I grew up with a mom that had severe mental health issues during my upbringing, and my family came from deep poverty. Most of my family's from Uvalde, Texas. Most people never knew what Uvalde was till that horrible shooting there last year, but and that's where most of my family is now. And I grew up around around a lot of issues, incarceration, things like that, incarceration. But my experience as kind of a lower middle class kid growing up in Davison, Michigan, was separated from these family experiences that I had, when the family would get together. And I think when I got through college and started working, I was very much intent on not being a guy that was associated with any kind of mental illness at all, not being a guy that was associated with any kind of poverty or any kind of substance abuse, and it fueled an obsession for me to focus on my career. So, I worked my way through college, started taking graduate classes. I knew I had to find a job doing something, and answered an ad for a grant writer at the Foodbank of Eastern Michigan, and they hired me for this job. And my wife's family, they have engineers and, lawyers in their family, and I can remember when I first started that job, kind of feeling made fun of a little bit sometimes at family gatherings where, they were all professional people, and they would, like, hey, what's happening down at the food place? You got any dented cans or anything like that? And my ego didn't respond very well to that. I think there was a part of me that still wanted to try to play some societal game with how I'm considered or thought of. But it wasn't long after I started visiting food pantries and getting hugs from the people that we served, and feeling the love and acceptance from them, which was so contrary to the little comments that I would get from other people about the nature of the work. Right. And I realized that the people who loved me most in my life were always the poorest people. They're always the people that were the least, and that was my family. And I started seeing myself in the people that we serve and the people that we work alongside of, and that's when it hit me. This is all I ever want to do. Now, becoming CEO was a whole different ballgame, right? And that was kind of, well, I've discovered my mission, my purpose. I don't have health insurance, I need to try to make a career and a life out of this work. And so I began to aspire to move into leadership. I always was kind of in leadership roles, through school and stuff like that. And when the opportunity came to interview for this job back in 2003, I had a heck of a good first interview. They hired me. I got the job when I was 32. And the rest is just kind of history. I think for me and my experience, there's been this blend of a deep heart connectedness to the work that has sustained me. Yeah. An ability, an obsession with work. I think having OCD is not all bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You have lots of energy,
yeah.
and you're able now to channel it.
Yeah, I've known its bad sides. I've suffered from this anxiety issue I've had in my life, plenty. I've also benefited a great deal from the attention to detail and some of the the energy that I've had as a result of it. I think if most leaders were honest, there would be some element of ego that drove them into leadership. That same ego that caused them problems later in their leadership, that drove people away from them, brought them to some awakening. They hit a wall at some point, and then they either transition through it into a more soft and sweet and loving person, or it grinds them to bits somewhere, 10 years in. I've been fortunate to be able to last and endure through that, and now here I am. At this stage in my career, having had a lot of years to do the work and to love it, and to grow in the role. So I'm so glad to be doing it. But that's a little bit about my story, what got me here.
Yes, and thank you for that. And the common thread, I think that our viewers, listeners, anybody reads our transcripts for our shows, is when individuals like yourself in leadership, top C-suite roles, that there is a theme. The people that are the happiest, what I'm finding it now with myself, is when it's not just a paycheck that's associated with a job or a career, that there's some emotional and some drive inside that keeps you waking up wanting to go to work and continue on your mission. Where I know earlier in my career, I had a huge disconnect, and some people may as well, of chasing the almighty dollar, chasing the almighty title. And while titles, I think, are nice, and I think they come with time and with work, but if you're not tied into kind of that emotional side of buying into the business of, if I wake up tomorrow and if I'm okay, if I have food, water, shelter, clothing, have those things, would I still do what I'm doing? And it's just interesting to see over time and different individuals and guests to talk about that and to see that kind of in my own life. Sure. And it takes a little bit of time from what you've discussed, and I know for me, 41 years to find it. And I think that's the holy grail of being able to put that together, because if you don't like what you're doing, you might do it for the wrong reasons, and there might be ramifications, not being happy, burnout, and all those other things. Whereas you're going to have down days, but those down days are still much better because you love what you're doing.
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny because I've been fortunate to speak to a lot of people about their professional aspirations. People seek me out to talk about their careers. Maybe they're considering a career change and they're looking at a nonprofit. And I think a lot of times there's a misconception that it's some kind of fairy land, and that you find these jobs you're passionate about, and then you're happy all the time. You know, I've known some really miserable people that run organizations, that run nonprofits. I've known some people that had the wrong motives. I've known some people that really seemed to me like they were only doing it for the money. I've met people that were so passionate about their ideas, they shut other people out of the conversation and the dialogue. Oh. And so you know, and also, if you can't get up every day and, you know, do whatever job you may be doing and find purpose in that, there's no hope for any of us. So I have to believe that although I found a lot of purpose and strength in this, that my job has no more ultimate purpose than any other job. And I really think that's true. And I encourage everybody to look at what you're doing as your mission field. Now, you might not like it. That's a different conversation. But I believe that every person, from whatever their station in life is in, has an opportunity to shine a light of love and humanity among the people around them, and to find meaning in the work that they're doing simply because they're alive. Think about this, that every day the ant gets up with the sun and then arises to its purpose, which is to do work. Then it carries its little pieces of sand around its little ant nest. And that work is perfectly aligned with its purpose. And I think we overthink a lot of this stuff, that we need to get up every day, we have to rise to our work, we have to do it humbly. Now, if you're lucky enough to find a job you love, then God bless you. Yeah. You know, but don't feel bad if you don't. Just keep on working. That's the way I see it. There's another thing, too, about the nonprofit sector I like to tell people when they're considering the jobs, is like, man, there's work to do. Right. So like every day we have to pay the price of admission. We have to show up. We have to get after it. This pandemic was the hardest time of my life. I've worked as hard as I've ever worked. So these aren't retirement jobs. You don't go to the nonprofit sector to slow down and take it easy. Right. You know, you're going to work and you're going to get after it. Now you can love it and you can get a lot of meaning in your life for it. But I don't want people to think that. You can just go to the nonprofit sector and ride it out because you're gonna suffer like you would anywhere else. You got to work.
You just hit the nail on the head. You have to work, and that's where having that tie of liking what you do, or looking for something else. And I think one of the other keys that you're hitting on is, we're all human beings, and we all kind of go through life, and we can't take any things with us. And I've been thinking a lot in the last year or two, which has brought me into forming Voices for Voices, the organization, and not just the event, is how do I want to leave the world? And not in a facetious way of thinking negative, but more of how do I want to be remembered? Do I want to, in my experience in the past, do I want to be a partier or somebody that is abuses substances and does things like that and addictions? Or do I want to your point, take that channeled energy, which I have a ton of, and taking that and do some good so that at the end of the day, you're talking about 40,000 hours today that you've put into the industry and into the work. And no doubt it would be thought of as somebody, as a humanitarian that really changed the world, that you took where you grew up from and you made it into what you wanted it to be. And in the course of doing that, you've helped so many people. And at the end of the day, that's really all we can really do as human beings. We can either try to help ourselves as much as possible, which we still have to do that, or we can help ourselves to an extent and then share that energy with others. And that's why I love what you do in your story and where you came from and where you're at now, what you continue to do, and to have this passion that you have 20 years in, that sometimes it falls after a period of time.
Sure.
You know, the honeymoon phase is over.
Yeah. Well, you know, I just to talk a little bit about burnout, because I think that burnout there's a lot of popular misconception about what it is to be burnout in a job, because it's not a permanent state. Not for most people. Most people that we have a lot of tenure at the Foodbank, So I've spent a long time with a lot of my coworkers. I think we've all been burnt out.
Yeah.
I mean, there was times in the pandemic I thought there's no coming back for this. You know how Frodo in The Lord of the Rings threw the Ring of Power into Mount Doom, but he couldn't go back to the Shire?
Yeah.
You know, he couldn't go back to being who he was. There's been times where I feel like I have been permanently burnt out or altered in this job. And I don't know how I can keep doing it, or I don't know how I could ever transition into being just a regular guy after doing this. But I take a vacation, and I take a little break, and I come back to sanity, and I find myself restored. Sometimes you have to hang in there for 6 months or a year or 2 years. You'll have 3 bad years in a row where you think you can't get by sometimes. That's life, that's leadership. But you have to hang in there, you know. And so, you know, I just encourage people, when you feel like you're in the burnout state, not to give up hope, just to know that, you know, if you hang in there, things will come back around for you. And when someone else is burnt out, don't think they're out of the game. That's the other thing too. If you've got somebody across from you and you're like, listen, I can tell you seem to have had enough. Encourage them to take a break, but always have faith that they'll recover. If we tell someone they're burnt out, what message does that send about their recovery? So everyone can come back. It just takes more time, and sometimes you can't come back to the same job, you know? That's true for some people as well. But, you know, Justin, you're such a great guy, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
When you were talking, too, about legacies, what book was it? Stephen Covey, that talks about begin with the end in mind?
Yes.
So one thing I would encourage people that are watching or listening today, because I don't think it's morbid to think about our own death. I think it's going to happen. And I had a friend one time give me the advice to write my obituary.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know, have you ever done that?
I've heard about it. I haven't done it.
I cried when I did it. It was a very cathartic experience for me. Because I guess I hadn't really sat there and thought about in that kind of detail, like, when this story is written, what do I want it to have said? Yeah. I want it to have a beginning, middle, and an end. I want all the chapters to have built to something, to have the whole story make sense. And my greatest aspiration for what my life was is captured in these words. And it has me staying married to this wife till the very end. You know, the one I found as a young man. It has me having a career that had some meaning where I gave back. It has faithfulness in it. And it's been over the course of my lifetime so instructive. And it's redirected me and it's fueled me many times, because we stand at these forks in the road in life where we can go off and we can wander and do the wrong thing, or make a career change that isn't consistent with our dreams. Maybe make decisions in relationships that alienate people that you want in the end to be present. So I really think that's a good thing to do. If you do it, let me know.
Yeah. And I've heard about people doing it, and I just may, because I think one thing it will also do is it takes your life and puts it in a few paragraphs. So all life that we had as individuals is going into 3, 4, 5, maybe half page. Yeah. And then that's it. And somebody outside of our family is going to read it, and then they're going to move on. And so I think the things that you're talking about are accomplishments that I think sometimes society and individuals, take for granted. Yeah. Family, having family with you, being invited to family gatherings, or whatever that may be. There were many times in my life, and I haven't overcome the mountain. I'm doing better.
You're in it.
I'm in it. Yeah. And the individuals that I alienated 10, 15, 20 years ago, to your point, I want them in my life, and there were things I was doing that was pushing them away, and now it is clarifying to see that they're still with me on the journey, that whether they let me make my own mistakes and move on, or however that may be. And I think that sometimes society and individuals, they have the wrong ideas about what an accomplishment is. Staying together, staying married, doing something that you love with your life, with your hours. And as you well know, being a CEO, you spend more time with that family at work than your family in many instances. So it makes sense to want to at least work towards that happiness. We might not be there today. Maybe it is a career change, a change in job. Maybe it's moving to a different geographic setting. But just continuing to work and to know that, like you mentioned, that it's just a moment in time. I read a story once about an individual who was trekking across Antarctica. They wanted to, I think, break some type of world record from west to east. And the temperatures and the winds and everything that they were dealing with, they were asked at the end, after they accomplished what they set out to, what kept you going, with these negative temperatures, blustery wind, hard to find food, all these things. And they answered, this was only a moment in time, that this will pass. That yes, at this time, this is happening, but this will pass. Your point and my point about anxiety and different things, these are just points in time. They're going to pass, that we're going to get through them. It's just about kind of managing and taking those emotions and that energy and putting it towards a positive use and versus focusing on the negative. And that's something I've learned through many years of therapy and still continue to try to work towards. But when you talked about giving speeches and going through anxious times, and those were just moments in time.
They were.
We continue to live after them in most cases, and it helps with that experience for that next time.
Yeah, and and no amount of consolation would have helped me at the time.
Yes.
It might have given me hope, maybe, and that's a big help. But sometimes you're just under the poop pile. And you've got to do your time in there. And then little by little, you dig your way out, and the sun shines back on your face again. But you'll be back in it. And that's just the way life goes. But, for me, just to complete that point, sitting down and writing an obituary, at least I was able to throw the ball as far into the future as I could and come up with a plan for my life. And I think that there's people that, the longevity in our relationships, to me, is the best demonstration of our character. That doesn't mean some relationships can't or shouldn't break up. Some relationships should not. There's some people you should not have in your life. And maybe that was a spouse. And maybe that's part of their journey that wasn't part of your original hope for your destination. Well, sit down and rewrite it. You know what I mean? Put your best aspirations back into it and work your way towards that. And recalibrate your aspirations, but always be working towards your ideal self. And that way you're not so focused on the moment. And that's a big thing.
It is. And there's certain things we can control, but we can impact. And there's certain things that we just can't, with the weather and certain things that we just have to live with. It's just making the best use out of the things that we can impact and that we do. Having a job, do we go on time? Do we go early? Do we go late?
Yeah.
And just work on those, and then work on the other things that maybe might not be where you or I want to be at 100%. This state, but we're still doing these 5 or 6 things, and we're continuing on that road, and we know eventually somewhere along that path that other things are going to come. We're going to have people that are going to see the good that we're doing. I know I've gone through many burning bridges over the years, and trying to go back and rekindle just a friendship. And some people, they don't want that, and that's okay. I just have to get through that and just focus on what I can control. I can't control what somebody else is thinking. Now, hopefully, as they start seeing positive things happen, enough of those, them say, okay, I'm finally bought in, I'll listen to his apology, whatever that may be. And I think that's important.
It is. I think trying to reconcile relationships is really, really important. And that also does not necessarily mean you should have that person in your life all the time. But nursing a beef only hurts us. You know, there's a couple things that kind of ride with these themes that we're talking about. I want to switch, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
there's a couple things I wanted to mention to you. What got me thinking about it is you said something about, it was kind of a reference to the weather. I don't know if you get the winter blues. Do you get the winter blues?
Oh, I do. Yep.
Yeah,
That's sad. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. It's not like, I think thank God. I've definitely had anxiety with a big A, but I've only ever really had depression with a little d. I know a lot of people have big D depression. I think, but this has been an interesting season in my life. When I was here with you a year ago, my dad's death was pretty raw. It was pretty recent. And there was a piece of advice somebody gave me that helped me a lot I wanted to mention because I think it's helpful maybe to some of your viewers or listeners. When I was passing through that grief and it was deep, Shelley Hinton, who worked with us at the Foodbank, told me, Dan, I've heard that grief is like being put in a box full of ping pong balls. And every ball that hits you while you're in that box hurts the same. Over time, they'll take the balls out one by one, but you'll never leave the box, and there's always one ball in it. And I think 6 months after he died, 8 months, 10 months, the balls started coming out of the box. I've been getting hit still, but it doesn't hit me that often anymore. And that's the process of grief to me. And I think if someone is grieving today, and they're in that box, there's no going over it, there's no going around it, there is going through it. But little by little, you're going to get hit less and less by that grief. So you have to hang on to that hope while it slightly gets a little bit easier. So that's one thing I wanted to share. There's been a transition in my life that's had some grief in it recently because we're empty nesters now. All of my kids have left for college. And so Dad passed away, the kids have moved on, and my wife and I now are in this new phase of life full of promise. But it's a different phase of life, And so here I am now in my 50s with more back pain than I used to have. No dad to call to talk about it. The kids moved out. And recognizing that there's this phase of life. And so I've been kind of thinking, I don't think I'm having a midlife crisis necessarily, but I do think I'm in a transition point in life. And so, I've been doing some reading and talking to friends about that. And I came across the happiness U-curve. Have you heard of the happiness U-curve?
I haven't.
All right, so I got a picture of it. I'll show you here real quick because I wanted to show this to you. Now, this has been somewhat disputed, but what I'm showing, right now is a widely researched phenomenon that early in our lives, we're carefree, fancy-free kids. Then we get married, then we have kids, then we get careers, and we get bills, and we do adulting, and life is harder and in many ways less happy. And you can see in this graph here, the happiness bottoming out at about 45. But as you can see, this is the arc for almost every person. By the time they get into their 60s and 70s, they're happier than they were in their 20s and 30s. And so this right here has been something that's been on my mind a lot lately as I transition to this new vision in life, this new vision of the possibilities that come in the future, is that hope matters for all of us, that there's going to be transitions. We're going to say goodbye to people that we love, that we raised, and then other things are going to come in to fill life with increased levels of happiness. And so I think that's kind of my message I wanted to share with people a little bit today. There are transition points in life. I'm optimistic on my own personal journey about where I'm headed. But I want people out there that are listening to feel, one, that it's okay to feel like you're in a transition point in life. Maybe it's healthy to frame where you're at, not as necessarily a crisis, but a transition, because everything rides on hope. And so that's my report.
And I like that, and that transitions into the next area I wanted to have you touch on. As with life transitions, ups and downs, changes, there's changes that are happening with the food bank. There's new construction.
Oh,
so that hope that is going to be now
Yeah.
offered to more people, and I think.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. We can certainly do that. You know, you always have to be having a new vision. And, to finish this last point,
Sure.
I've been working on a 10-year strategic plan for me, just for my own life as I move forward in it. And certainly, we're always working on strategic plans for the organization as well. We just released a new 3-year strategic plan for the Foodbank earlier in the month. And one component of that is to complete these construction projects. We've been doing it for a while. Have you been to our new Canton?
I haven't.
All right,
I've just seen pictures online.
Right. So we opened a brand new food bank in Canton in the summer of 2021. It was 6 weeks after Dad died, man. We cut the ribbon on that and had that big community celebration. It was so surreal. Yeah. But talk about learning what you're capable of. One of the things this quote hit me last year. One of the great gift of perseverance is knowledge of what you're capable of enduring.
Yes.
The great gift of perseverance is knowledge of what you're capable of enduring if you don't quit. Right? So whatever is coming at you, if you don't quit, you will know how strong you are. And that's of tremendous value, So anyway, we cut the ribbon in July of 2021 on this brand new, beautiful, gorgeous food bank in Canton. I'd love to have you come down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take a tour sometime. And a second part of that project was to build an expansion in our Akron facility. We broke ground in that in October, and we've got about another 8 months of work on that before that's done. But when we get that project wrapped up, it's going to complete about 7 years of planning, implementation, fundraising, execution, responding to the pandemic while we're doing building campaigns. But we're going to have this position fortified with infrastructure and resources to serve this community for generations to come as a result of these projects. Now, our Akron facility is going to be completely renovated and ready to rock and roll. Like I said, we've got this Canton building now and a whole line of new programs that are coming into line too. Home delivery boxes for people. We're getting into all kinds of programmatic areas as a result of community support and capacity that's making such a difference in people's lives. And I could come in and just do I like to talk about stuff besides the food bank with you.
Okay.
Because you're one of the few people that I talk to that have a heart for issues, personal issues, mental health issues. Yeah. I love that. But I'd be happy to come in and do an hour of just food bank stuff because we got some cool programs going on, and we could just we'll do just that sometime. All right,
sure thing.
And we'll get into food security and insecurity and all that stuff big time. But I'm really looking forward to giving the keynote at the Voices for Voices event. Continue to support your work in any way I can. And have you been reading anything good? Any good books?
I just got Saved, the Benjamin Hall story. The reporter that was in Ukraine was bombed, and he lost 2 legs.
Okay.
And made it out alive. He had a vision after the first drone dropped a bomb that his daughter was saying in a calm voice, "It's okay. You can make it through this." And somehow, I don't know what the time period was in that, he makes it out of the car, and just as within a short amount of time, that car was hit again. And his
this is pretty recent.
It's pretty recent. It happened last year. The book I just purchased it last week, and just I've seen some of his interviews, and I just can't imagine. He's just traveling people that have been with him in all kinds of situations all over the years, and they end up getting killed. And he says, "Well, why not me?" And then he thought of his daughter and that there was more to life. And so through all the pain, the physical therapy, the bone grafts, all the things he's had to endure, it's how can I help and share my story with others. I'd love to get him on the show. I've reached out to him, but I know he's busy. And but those types of stories and individuals that get thrown in situations, I'm sure that wasn't on his personal plan. What he had thought of as what was going to happen. He was going to continue the day
Yeah.
with the people that he'd been traveling with and working with. He wasn't expecting what happened to occur, but it's taken something that he didn't have a lot of control over, and could have went one of two directions. Like you said, you get that fork in the road, and very easily could have, I mean, I can't imagine being in that situation. Could have just given up and just like, okay, like I can't make it out. I'm in such pain, but to make it out and then especially to see the car like explode, and it's just it's hard. But to hear those types of stories, it's like on one of my bad days is like. It's no comparison. It's something I might be complaining about. And I think sometimes those stories, and it doesn't have to be that extreme, but those types of stories can help put into perspective life and say, okay, well,
For sure.
This is huge.
Have you ever heard that saying, make your mess your mission?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's a really common saying. You hear that. Another similar phrase is like, it's like the compassion of the afflicted. People that experience certain struggles become very compassionate to other people that are having those struggles, which you know, I think are really powerful things. You know, for me, it sounds like a very interesting book.
Yeah.
You know,
I saw one of his interviews, and I had a chance to get to the bookstore. I wasn't sure if it was out because sometimes they'll do pre-interviews. That it's coming soon. I guess the last kind of topic I want to just discuss is. Transition in our lives, roadblocks that happen, planting a seed and watching it grow. So I have a hard time, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers may have at certain times, where we feel like we're doing good work, and maybe success isn't coming as fast. You know, whether that's tied to money or whether that's tied to talking to an individual that can help prosper a brand or an organization. How do you look at, because just to put the Foodbank in the perspective of 7 years of all the different activities that happened, it wasn't just, oh, well I want to do this, we want to do this, let's do it. No. All these things happen. What kept you, and I guess what type of message when things like that, whether it's professionally or just personally, you've set that vision of like, I want to do it, and to your point, persevere through, don't give up. Because I've been at times where I'm like, you know what, I'm going to give up. Like, for whatever reason, I'm going to give up. And then for whatever, I don't give up, but I know that I'm not the only one that might be, have had thoughts about that.
Sure. Have you read Good to Great, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great?
No.
Okay, so I would recommend that to you and everybody. Okay. It's probably my very favorite book about leadership. He breaks down a lot of leadership principles, but one of them he calls the Stockdale principle, about this Admiral Stockdale, who was a prisoner in one of the Hanoi, prison camps. You know, he was a pilot in the Vietnam War. And a reporter asked him, so, what was your secret to surviving this horrific imprisonment? And he says, well, I'll tell you what, the people who made it weren't the optimists that thought for sure one day they'd be rescued, because those optimists, their spirit was broken. And the pessimists didn't make it either, because the pessimists never believed and never had any hope. The realists are the ones who survived. They are the ones that realized, I might not get out anytime soon, but I believe I will. I'm going to hang in there. Okay. And that's the Stockdale principle, which is keep your feet on the ground and be a realist. Yeah. You should never surrender hope that you're going to survive in the end, but don't be looking for it to come anytime soon.
Yeah. Okay.
Keep your feet on the ground. And that's one of the things that, have you ever heard or noticed in the Bible how often they take the word patience and they replace it with long suffering?
I haven't, I know what you're talking about.
You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. So I don't think of, I think of patience as, well, I need to keep my cool while I'm waiting in this grocery line, I don't think of patience necessarily as the same word as long suffering, which is my willing to suffer for a long, long time. Yes. But I am.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I am. And you know, and the better we get at suffering, the more we keep our feet on the ground, the more we don't surrender hope, but don't look for a rescue. I think the stronger we are as individuals. We just got to hang in there, be relentless, and never quit. Now, and another part of being keeping our feet on the ground, is I think being realistic. Like we have to set reasonable goals. We have to be realistic with ourselves, and we also have to kind of consider putting the effort forward as the larger part of success sometimes. Yeah. There we go, right? So we're working at this. I'm being relentless in the effort and the output towards this vision. I didn't get the outcome I intended, but there's redemption in the effort itself. I might redirect and try something different, but I gave it one hell of a shot. I like that viewpoint too. I do. So I think there's a lot of different ways that I would encourage anybody who's working on something, they're experiencing setbacks, you know, be realistic. Not everybody is going to be able to get everything they want done. I don't. I've been saying for years things would be a lot different at the Foodbank if I was in charge. Because the point is, the point is that I'm always having to work with people with different visions. I have to change all the time. I've got a million ideas that are on the parking lot, in the conference room, you know, in that little, you know how they put your ideas in the parking lot? That's where my ideas go to die. I've got tons of things I want to do. It's in the parking lot. Because none of us are going to, you know, get our way. We're not going to get what we want all the time. So you got to hang in there, you know. So that's my advice on that.
And I think to crystallize that, as you were speaking, in kind of personal terms, if we look at our parents, where they were, if we compare, okay, where I'm at age 41 and my parents are at in their 70s, whether that's in retirement or that house, whatever those things are, I can't compare. I mean, I can't compare, but it's probably not healthy to compare myself in a situation that has many more years of experience and whatever experiences that they've had, just like an organization that is 2 years in comparing itself to an organization that's been around 100 years. You know, I've talked to retiring CEOs before, and you know, because I think these jobs are so consuming, self-absorbing. And you know, I talked to one that was actually a member of a support group. They'd been attending to try to get through this transition to not being a CEO anymore. And I guess they have a saying, which is FIP, formerly important person. And when I heard that saying, I thought that's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. Because if I think being an important human being in mattering is in some way inherently woven in some aspect of my career, I've missed the mark. How am I going to go to being just Dan if my importance is derived from my being CEO or you running Voices for Voices? So we have to see that within ourselves, being alive is in and of itself the fulfillment of the whole thing in any way. You know, there is no greater. My life is no greater expression of amazingness than anyone else's life who's ever lived. That's the truth. That's the facts. That is.
So, and if we don't prepare ourselves to be whole, aside from what we're doing now, that doesn't speak to a lot of hope for the future, does it? You know, and if we can we judge ourselves a little lighter where we are today? That's the point.
It is. And I think that's a great way to end our conversation.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Justin.
Thank you, Dan, for
you're a great guy.
Just all the time, just a wide ranging of topics, and just being open, sharing, and talking about things so candidly. That we really appreciate it. I know I do.
Yeah.
And everybody that has checked out your previous conversation we've had, and definitely once we made some changes, and updated. Wanted to get
Yeah.
you in as well, and
Well, we're going to put some love on the crowd that
Yeah.
comes out on the 13th of October. We're going to lay it on them real good. I saw you've got Allison Burrow lined up for that
Yeah.
day too. She's great.
Yeah.
I love Allison.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her work with the mental health court, fantastic.
Yeah, she's amazing, and I'm just so excited to have you here with us today on 13th, and for all the work that you do personally and professionally. You're awesome.
Thanks,
I guess.
buddy. Well, I'm always cheering for you. So
Thank you.
let me know what I can do to support you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We want to give a big thank you today to our guest, Dan Flowers, the president and CEO of the Akron-Canton Regional Foodbank, for the wide-ranging conversation, the transparency, and just talking about what it's like to be human. So until next time, I'm Justin Allen Hayes. Have a great day and be a voice for you or somebody in need.